Commissioners, if we go back to 1992, we realized that there was a need to put our infrastructure to water and wastewater plants. And in doing so, there was a lot of infrastructure that had to be put in here. And probably the biggest financing plan that ever happened in the state or in the country here, right here in Miramar. And in doing so, Mr. Whittingham Gordon was there from the beginning at that time in here to now. And at this point, I'm going to ask Mr. Whittingham to over the whole utility and the infrastructure improvements that have taken place in these many years to address this issue. Whittingham.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, city staff, guests, and residents. My name is Whittingham Gordon, Deputy City Manager. First, I'd like to say that I began my career with the City of Miramar in 1995 as a utility engineer inspector. Throughout my 26 years of experience of dealing with utility infrastructure development, operations, management, and administration, I'm very proud and impressed with the professionalism and dedication of our utility staff. I can say with confidence that the City of Miramar Utilities Department is one of the best run utilities in the nation. With the trust and support of our City Commission, we always take a proactive, not reactive, approach to stay ahead of the curve when dealing with growing demands of water capacities and maintaining full compliance with ever-changing, stringent rules and regulations. We continue to strive to be the best public water supply provider. We always look to optimize and enhance our operations. This is an ongoing effort and will never end. In order to tackle this issue, we have retained the service of two independent, national recognized firms that specialize in water treatment technologies and corrosion control. With us this afternoon is Kimberly Horn, led by Mr. Miller, their Vice President, and Dr. Stephen Durancio, an academic scholar, professor, and corrosion control expert. Also with us is Hazen Sawyer, led by Mr. Pat Davis, Vice President and utility industry expert, with over 20 years of direct knowledge of Miramar utility system. And Dr. Becker, an award winner by the American Water Works Association, a drinking water treatment specialist and researcher. You'll also hear from Assistant City Manager Calvin Baker and Director of Utilities, Dr. Roy Virgin. They will provide an overview of our water treatment process, water testing, and quality control. We'll also address specific matters on what next steps to take to move forward. Without further ado, I now invite Assistant City Manager Calvin Baker to share his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Gordon. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioner, City Manager, City Attorney, City Clerk, and to our listening community today. Thank you for your time and your attention to this important matter. The issue that we will be highlighting before you this evening is not a local issue. It's not a Miramar issue. It's not even a statewide issue. And to go even further, it's not even a national, it's an international issue that's been out there for many years. However, in this workshop, we will highlight the problems coupled with looking at scientific data that was used to evaluate this issue to bring before you some recommendation this evening. As we look at some of the recent complaints noted in the map before us, these particular items before us is what has allowed us to come together this afternoon that actually formed this as being a problem and something that our city needs to pay close attention to. But the map provides known locations of copper pipe leaks within our city service area. This afternoon, we want to provide you with a status summary and an overview of the water treatment plant. Kimberly Horn will be providing a water quality review. Hazen and Sawyer will provide a review from a national perspective. And then I'll be back with you with some final recommendations. But before we move forward, we do want to highlight some of the actions that our city has taken to date, some of the best management practice actions that we've employed. The city has performed an operational review of our entire system. We met with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. We retained experts from Kimberly Horn, national water treatment experts. Retained experts from Hazen and Sawyer, national water treatment experts. We collected samples of pipe with pinhole leaks throughout our service area. And we collected data on locations where pinhole leaks have been reported. At this time, we want to begin our presentation, and we want to begin it with our very own Dr. Roy Virgins, our utility director. Thank you.
Thank you, A.C.M. Baker. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, my commissioner, city manager, City of Miramar resident. My name is Roy Virgin. I'm the director for utilities. I want to start by giving you an overview of the wastewater treatment plant and also look at some of the water quality control parameters and some of the testing that we've done. So from the get-go, let me start by saying emphatically that the City of Miramar provides drinking water that is in total compliance with all the local, state, and federal standards, which include copper corrosion and regulation. In addition to that, we have tested over 20,000 water quality tests per year to ensure the safety and protection of our residents. So the wastewater treatment plant. This plant operates using what is called membrane softening technology in the treatment process. The plant was commissioned in about 1995 and since then has gone through several expansions. Total capacity of the plant is about 11.75 million gallons per day. Of that, 9.25 million gallons is from the nanofiltration process and 2.5 million gallons from the reverse osmosis treatment, combination of 11.75. So the question that residents may ask is, where do we get our water from? Where does Miramar get its water from? So Miramar water comes from really two places. One is what we call the Biscayne aquifer, and two, the Floridan aquifer. These aquifers, the Biscayne aquifer, is a highly porous zone charged primarily by rainwater and surface water, mainly from Okeechobee. It is about 60 to 150 feet below our feet here in Miramar. In contrast, the Floridan aquifer is a deeper and more confined aquifer where the water is approximately 1,300 feet below the ground. So these are the two aquifers that the wastewater treatment plant gets its water from. So let's look at some of the characteristics or what the differences are in both freshwater system where we get our raw water from. And so what we did, we examined approximately 9 parameters and look at the comparison so that the resident can have an understanding what is Biscayne aquifer, what is the Floridan aquifer, and what are those water qualities. So we look at the pH, which is really potential hydrogen. And we note that the Biscayne and Floridan aquifer, Biscayne is 7.17 or approximately 7.2 pH, and the Floridan is approximately 7.7. A little bit above neutral on the pH scale. The conductivity, which we'll note on the Biscayne side, is about 732 microsiemens per centimeter. However, on the Floridan side, it's approximately 5,000. That's a huge difference. Remember, I spoke that earlier that one is about 60 to 150 feet, and the Floridan is up to 1,300 feet. So one of the reasons why we check for conductivity is because it's the ability of water to pass electrical current. And also, as conductivity increases, so does salinity or salt. So why do we really check for conductivity? And I'm stressing this parameter particularly because it's a good indicator of the general water quality measure. It provides stability, it shows stability in the water body, and where there are great fluctuations, it will indicate that there's pollutant that is being inside that water body. So usually you can tell that the body is stable by the conductivity that is measured. The temperature is pretty much the same, a little different. But look at the other 3 parameters: chlorides, sulfate, and total dissolved solid. Chloride and sulfate without the salt. Talked about that earlier on, the salinity. For the Biscayne aquifer, it's about 35 milligrams per liter. And the Floridan is 1,300 milligrams per liter. The sulfate is about 3 milligrams per liter on the Biscayne side, and on the Floridan side is 400. So there you can tell, just by the fact that the Floridan well is 1,300 feet below, that the water is a little more brackish, has a little more salt. And so these are the different parameters that tell. It doesn't mean that one is good and one is bad. That's what it's telling you. What it's telling us as the operators of the plant and the chemists and all those people is that the treatment, what you need to do to remove those excess contaminants, so to speak. The dissolved solids, 350 on the Biscayne side, and you can see on the Floridan side, again, over 3,100. We check turbidity, ion, and color. Those are pretty much within range. This diagram here, chart, is really a flow chart. It shows the process. And in blue, you can see that's the nanofiltration side. And in the orange is the reverse osmosis side. So what you see is that in the blue, we get the water from which is the nano, we get it from the Biscayne aquifer. From the Floridan, which is the reverse osmosis, we got the water from the Floridan well. So it passes through what you call a pre-treatment, then into the membranes. Then from that, which is left, we pump that, as we call that, reject water back into the ground about 3,000 feet. Then the water that we need, which is called permeate at that time, is not totally finished. And need to have some addition to what they call post-treatment from both sides. So it's blended in what we call the clear well. And then there's addition of disinfectant, fluoride, inhibitors, all of those stuff that are added to it. Then from there, it goes to the holding tank. we have pretty much two, on the west side, we got two storage tanks. We have 4.2 million gallons on site at the plant, and we got a 3 million west of the 75. From there, it is pumped through your high service pump and to your residents and customers. So that's a kind of overview as to how the process works. Now, that is the hard work. That's hard work. But we can make the water without having some quality control checks, and that the water must follow the regulations set forth by the state and the federal government. We can't just produce the water and then send it out and say, drink the water, use the water. It has to follow the guidelines set forth by the state. So the City of Miramar has a certified water quality lab, which is certified through the National Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Conference and the Florida Department of Health. The lab holds approximately 85 fees of accreditations or certification in different areas such as microbiology, chemistry, and is certified to analyze drinking water, domestic wastewater, solids, and chemicals, and so forth. So to the right, at the bottom right, is a copy of the certificate of the state, from the state. So how do we monitor the water that comes through? And this is before I bring Kimberly Horn to speak on their side of the water quality. How do we monitor the water? The water quality is monitored through continuously. It's done through a number of instruments, analyzers, different kind of instrument that checks different parameters. So the raw water, which we talked about earlier, which is the Biscayne and the Floridan water, those are what's called raw water, the source water. And sometimes these are interchangeable words. These samples are done daily, and we test for approximately 9 different parameters. The finished water is sampled every 2 hours. And let me repeat, every 2 hours, the finished water is sampled for about 9 parameters. And this is done primarily in the process testing because we want to know that if anything changes during the process, it is catch right away. So every 2 hours, samples are taken and are analyzed for 11 parameters. We also test monthly, quarterly, annually for the finished water injection well, and also in the distribution system where we check monthly for our bacteriological sampling. This is important. This is one of the areas that's important because based on the size of the population, which we are about 140 residents, there's a requirement as to how many samples you'll take. It's 1 sample per 1,000, so we're looking at 140 samples thereabout. So every month, we have to check for these samples to ensure that there's no bacteria present. And if we find a total coliform, for example, there are steps that is required from the state as to how we address these things. But let me close before Mr. Kimberly Horn comes in, is to say that the lab, the City of Miramar Water Quality Lab, is in full compliance with all federal, state, and local regulations for drinking water and wastewater. I want to thank you, and I add Kimberly Horn to get the water quality.
Thank you, Roy. Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to present our findings for the city, what work we did with the city on the corrosion investigation we started back in 2000. My name is Mark Miller. I'm with Kimberly Horn, been with the company 35 years. Most of my experience is entering treatment facilities, very similar to the system you have, consolidated system that has 2 different treatment plants. Unlike any others that are in the state of Florida, extensive experience with corrosion inhibitor studies and whatnot. And so I'm going to do a brief description of the water system. Roy did it pretty well. You have 2 regional water treatment facilities, different capacities, consolidated, serve both systems. Each plant rated at 6.3 NTD.
Excuse me, can you raise your mic? So it's, yeah, you can raise it up. Yeah, so we can hear you.
Okay, apologize for that. These plant, yes, has a nanofiltration facility, membrane softening, like Roy said, removes TOC, also includes raw water blend capabilities for increased stabilization to stabilize the finished water It also includes corrosion inhibitor addition. West plant, 11.75 MGD rated plant, includes both nanofiltration and reverse osmosis, two membrane treatment processes Roy described that uses two different water sources. It also uses caustic or sodium hydroxide for a pH adjustment and corrosion inhibitor addition. These systems were isolated prior to improving the east water treatment plant and adding corrosion inhibitor to the east plant, and they're consolidated currently. This gives a snapshot of what the existing water quality is leaving both facilities. You can see most of the parameters are consistently the same: pH, chlorine residual. Alkalinity and hardness are a little bit different, but it's not any different than other facilities and systems, consolidated systems in South Florida. One of the key issues here too is that this water quality is consistent. It's the same leaving both plants and doesn't vary much with the older technology of the conventional treatment system we had before. Safe Drinking Water Act came up with the lead and copper rule that requires lead and copper testing throughout systems. You actually have more than 100 sample sites throughout your system using faucets, people's homes, and whatnot. And this is a good example of the history of that. It requires every 3 years to monitor and grab lead and copper samples throughout the system. Until you make changes to the system, then it requires either biannually or yearly testing. And as you can see, the graph to the left shows the red line, which is the lead action level when you need to report and do something to your system. You can see those levels have declined over the years. The dashed dark line shows when the corrosion inhibitor was added, which I'll get to in a minute. It shows that the decline continued. On the right is the copper results that, if you look at it, has declined over the years since 2010. And when versus some of the PhDs. It should be noted too, the city was not required by regulation to implement this, because you could see by the lead and copper results, you're in compliance. But the city did proactively to offset the system water quality changes that would occur when the east plant came online and those valves were open and connected and that system was consolidated. So essentially it was enhancing control of corrosion when the east plant was brought online and combined with that system. With that, we were engaged with the city to conduct a corrosion inhibitor investigation and testing at the west plant. The goal was to enhance control and mitigate any corrosion. Corrosion can and will occur. The city understood finished water quality is going to change with treatment change at the east plant. So this is what the purpose of the reason behind that. The addition of corrosion inhibitor feed to west plant could supplement reduced alkalinity for enhanced corrosion control. Corrosion inhibitor does add alkalinity to the system, and that was an important element. And we knew that the change in treatment at the east plant would affect the LCR, or may affect the LCR results, so that's why this was started. When it first started, the desktop water quality evaluation was started. With our experience with a lot of the other treatment systems and utilities throughout South Florida, we identified other facilities that dealt with these issues, such as systems in River County, Martin County utilities, a lot to the north. They're very similar to your system. We next conducted pilot testing using finished water from the west plant, injected different corrosion inhibitors in finished water, and then measured corrosivity versus gravimetric, weighing the samples into coupons, and an electronic version of looking at what corrosion rates occurred with lead and copper samples. These were true, real coupons that were used in the testing. What we yield is a selection of inhibitors with favorable results to reduce corrosion rates. Now, we just recently finalized that report. It's kind of a snapshot of the results of that data. It shows copper and lead corrosion did decline. A lot of the dots show the different types of corrosion inhibitors that were tested, phosphate, polyphosphate, different blends. But in the end, we used one that was obviously the best suited for that facility. So you can see when it was started in 2017, it did decline with time adding that corrosion inhibitor. Where we are right now, what happened after the report, city permit implemented a pilot, basically the corrosion inhibitor feed system continued to feed at the West plant, has been feeding since then. Currently implementing storage, a permanent storage and feed facilities at the West plant, currently under construction, Odyssey and us as the engineer record. That, let Dr. Dranso.
Good afternoon, honorable officials, city staff, professionals, and obviously the residents of the city. We can say that we're all part of a water community, all right? So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about, well, myself, I'm a professor of engineering at UCF. I mean, you can see my credentials. But I work with a lot of utilities across the country over my career, and issues such as corrosion. And in our territories and islands, coastal areas predominantly in my career. The next slide. There's two things that I would like to make sure that impress upon you with this talk, because you're going to hear a lot of charts and data and information, is these two things. One is that there are many causal factors of corrosion that are not easily discernible or easy to understand. And the second thing is that Florida's copper corrosion, in particular, is a very complex issue with no easy solutions for water communities. Next slide. So there are many different types of corrosion. So here's a picture of a type of corrosion that utilities face. So utilities themselves have a tremendous amount of infrastructure that's part of our financial health, so to speak, of any community that's a water purveyor, right? You have a tremendous amount of infrastructure that is out of sight, out of mind, but a lot of it is metal components. And it's subject to corrosion because water is a solvent and it likes to dissolve metal and other things into it, okay? And so with this, because of this infrastructure, the utilities themselves practice corrosion control because they need to protect their infrastructure. And in addition to, they need to protect the consumer from exposure to contaminants. So this picture, one more thing about this picture. So there's two pictures are shown. There's many types of corrosion, and these are actually the main ones, or you could list even more. But the top picture is a piece of infrastructure that was subject to what's called a blowhole or graphitization because of stray electrical current. The National Electric Code requires electricians to ground at least 5 feet of copper and have a grounding rods that at least give you 5 ohms. And it's very difficult in Florida to get a really good ground on a home or a building or facility because of the sandy soil that we have. So that's something that a lot of people don't understand, is that the electrical systems and the water systems are at times connected. The other picture is where you see corrosion leaks. And there's different types of leaks. And you see it's an elbow. So water itself erodes. You look at the weathering of the rocks, mountains are removed, and over time, long periods of time, will get eroded. And so here's a picture of a copper pipe that had some erosion of the metal, which caused a leak. And when you put a pipe in a home, it may take many years for you to see the leak, right? And so we're going to talk a little bit about how that happens. Next slide. So there's a picture of a pipe that's been longitudinally cut. And if you look in the literature and you read things, you can categorize 3 different major categories of the causal factors, and those are dissolution, abrasion, and maybe metabolic activity, meaning there's microbial. You know, we are a living planet, so there's microbial organisms that are in everything. Okay? So some examples are like the water quality pH. As long as you have alkalinity in the water, though, not often, it's not a problem. Flux corrosion, workmanship, similar pipes, a lot of different things can play into factors, and no one issue is the causal factor. And I'm going to talk a little bit about stray electrical current and lightning briefly, because Florida, we are the most lightning strikes in the world are in Florida. So there's factors that affect the way that we do our plumbing. So how they're installed in a home. We're obviously in a warm temperature that we use air conditioning a lot, but we do have a season that are very warm. Manufactured induced characteristics. We have workmanship issues. In fact, some of the peer review literature has shown that one of the major factors that contributes over the life expectancy of a home itself is anthropogenic, which means human interaction. And that's rarely discussed when we get into these issues where people emotionally respond to problems with their plumbing. Next slide. So I want to share with you a couple of stories, at least my experiences with dealing with this issue and with people in their home. And a major understanding is that people's exposure to a contaminant in a public water system is involuntary. People's exposure to a contaminant in a public water system is involuntary, which means that the federal government, the local governments, the health department, the regulations are there to protect the public when they drink water out of a water supply. Makes sense, right? And the amount of effort that goes into that is a huge effort. So here we have a couple of different stories. So pitting a dead pine. That was in Polk County, Florida. There was an area in the Imperial Lakes water system years. This is like 20 years ago. People were getting pitting corrosion in their home. And the utility, I would go out with the utility and we go meet with some of these people. And a lot of them are elderly, retired, fixed income. So when they have a major problem with their home, it's a big deal because of the financial impact on them, let alone the emotional impact. So it turns out I go into the one home with the utility and this couple, and they're very nice. We talked to them after a while. It's a beautiful home, but the shades are all closed. Finally, she opens up the slate, and there's a slash pine in the backyard that's been struck by lightning. So I asked, well, when did that happen? Such and such. When did you notice your leak? The day after. The hairdresser at the time, an FBI agent's wife, I didn't know he'd retired from the FBI. But in this case, the builder and the utility asked me to come and meet with this couple that was causing some issues with complaints about their water being green. And she was worried that she was having health effects because of the copper, because according to her hairdresser, she had a lot of copper in her body because of the copper she was exposed to, not from maybe from the hairspray, but from the drinking water. So I took some time and went in the home, and it took a while to convince her it wasn't the water. It was a beautiful sunny day. Go into the bathroom, fill up the glass, hold up, it's green. Go out in the backyard, crystal clear. Go back into the bathroom, it's green. Turns out she loves the color green. In the bathroom, it's completely marbled and green. So that color was imparted to the water, and so her perception was that was the issue. It wasn't the corrosion, and it wasn't the water. Golden faucets, we have a lot of utilities have problems with the lead and copper rule because people they have a really good golden faucet for people that are blessed enough to be able to have these types of features in their home. It takes a lot of lead and a lot of copper to get a really good faucet with gold plating on it. And so you can't buy these. They're not allowed in the plumbing code in the United States. So they bring them in from other countries. And then when you sample, you get high lead and copper levels. Nothing to do with the utilities, water. The last two things are probably the more important ones. The shock incident in Marin County in the far right, your far right picture, you can't see them, but there's an elderly couple from Marin County, California. And they had some of the highest lead and copper levels in the state of California at this time. And it turns out that they put their electrical boxes in the ground in this particular area of that state. We put them on our telephone poles, the transformers, we put them out in our yard. They're usually in boxes. And they're connected to our water system, whether you knew this or not. And our homes tend to be isolated. We have a lot of plastic pipe out in our systems, but we have metal pipes that go in the home. So the home is isolated. And so the meter reader was shot, had to go to the hospital. So I was involved in a study where we went around the country looking at shock hazard, stray currents, and corrosion, and we started to find that there was a link between if the grounding fault occurred in the electrical system, chances are the home had lead and copper issues because of the way the stray currents work in the house. The middle picture is a couple in the middle. I'm on your far right, and then far left is the utility manager, talking to a couple that's in Hawaii, the island. And I was asking them, they had the highest lead levels in the county of Maui at the time. And it turns out you have a protocol that you have partnered with your consumers to sample the homes in a specific way. He had gone up to the middle of the night. You're supposed to leave your tap at the kitchen tap alone for, the whole night. He got up and had a drink of water. She got really mad at him. She was really aggressively mad at him and was like hitting them and saying, "You idiot." And they didn't want to get in trouble with the utility because they wanted to be good stewards of participating in their health, right? Turns out they used the bathroom faucet. So I asked them, "Which is this room?" This is our guest room. "When was the last time you had people stay here?" 3 months ago. Again, lead and copper rule triggered as a high. Again, the utility had nothing to do with that number. The last one's probably the more important one about how complex this issue is in people's homes and how emotional it can get for people that have problems with fitting and corrosion. I get a call one day at my office, and I don't know how they found me, but there's a woman in Sarasota, Florida that had children. And one child, when she gave the bath every once in a while, would have to go to the hospital, broke on this horrible rash. So I had happened to be working with the city at the time, doing some work with them, and they said, engage this customer of ours, let's go out and talk to them. It took us a few months to figure this out. So what happened is the time that the child would be exposed to copper, she had electricians, she was an educated person that had left her employment to become a mom. And so it turns out that when the dishwasher got loaded and she turned it on, and the refrigerator was going, and the computer system was going with her husband working, the kids were watching and playing games, and she drew the bath. There was a ground fault that put several milligrams per liter of copper into the bathtub. And so when the child took the bath at that time, break out in a huge rash. They wanted to blame the utility for this problem. It didn't have anything to do, and they had corrosion, they had leaks. Next slide. When you look at copper pitting corrosion, here's a couple of pictures of what it looks like, produced by the EPA. So when you move into a home, there's typically a certificate of occupancy that has to be issued. The financial arrangements have to go through, the bank has to offer, and the checklist for the financial, the inspector, the county inspector or city inspector, whoever the inspector is, goes in and makes sure that the plumbing does not leak. They don't check for the quality of the workmanship. Power company doesn't come in and check for the quality of the electricity in the home, for the type of TV that you watch, for the type of music that you listen to. The only thing that's regulated in the home that the public is participant in is the lead and copper rule. The only law. So you can see in these two pits, you can see the copper pipe with this mound above it. That's the tubercle that's formed. And it's going to eventually break through. So what happens is between the time that the certificate of occupancy is typically issued, a period of time goes by where the water sits stagnant in the home. And the way the building codes are, and the way that the plumbing occurs, you can have a lot of different people involved in the plumbing. As long as there's a master plumber available and is licensed to do this work, they can do this. And so there's no guarantee that a piece of dirt with pipes laying on the ground or during the time that the house is being constructed or even afterwards, that some dirt or something doesn't get in the pipe. And when the water gets charged, it sits. And there's oxygen or a disinfectant on the outside, the bulk pipe, and then the little piece that's there, there's no oxygen. So what's called an anodic static pit, which is in itself is a very complex phenomenon, but it occurs nonetheless. That initiates the pit. And then the pit gets propagated as the people use the pipe over the years. If you have a very thick wall pipe, you can get 35, 40 years, 25 years out of that home. You use thin wall pipe, much quicker. It takes a long time for the pit to occur. Once it's initiated, it doesn't stop. It can be slowed down. Use of inhibitors is always a good idea. The lightning is shown to impact our plumbing. Dick Dunham, who was a chemist at Orlando Utilities Commission, when I was doing the stray current study, they had a study that they were doing for the American Water Works Association's Research Foundation, where they built a home inside their water plant to see how appliances and things affected the corrosion and how the water would affect the corrosion of a typical home. And he said that every time lightning storms moved through the area, they were monitoring copper and lead constantly. The amount of copper in the water would rise until the storm moved away. Again, the utilities provided the same water while this occurred. Next slide. So I've been involved in a lot in Florida and corrosion in Florida over my career. And here's an example of what happens when this issue that typically people take the responsibility to fix their leaks. They work with their plumber and they fix the problem, and it becomes like fixing your roof or fixing anything in your home. But then it gets elevated when people believe that their problem is the only one. It's their system, their utility is causing this issue. This is different, that's different, whatever the reason is. And so here's a community in Sarasota, Florida, where some of the people that the issue was elevated to the position of concern by elected officials, which they would be concerned because this is the constituent. And so when you start looking at this neighborhood, see all the yellows, we would go and we check these homes. And not all these homes had pitting corrosion, only a portion of them did, but they all claimed to have pitting corrosion. Next slide. As it turns out, 6 of those homes that had the issues had problems with their grounding and the pipe. It was difficult for them to understand that it couldn't possibly be the water. Next slide. So the customer's viewpoint is typically different than the utility's viewpoint. The customer viewpoint is, utility caused my problem. Really, is it the plumber or the builder that's involved in those discussions? It's a traumatic experience. It isn't. I've had pitting in my own home and my wife not talking to me for a week at a time, blaming me for the problem because I work in the water industry. Difficult. The problem's a local issue. It's not a local issue. It's a part of maintaining your home. Recurrent problems lead to frustration. Eventually, it has a financial impact because the plumbing has to be replaced at some point along the line of the homeownership. The water utilities perspective is typically it's the customer's responsibility. It's on their side of the property line. We provide safe drinking water to them. Safe Drinking Water Act applies. Protect public health, that exposure to the contaminants in their water supply because it's involuntary. And there's many causal factors of corrosion, and we have to embrace our consumer and public because we have this consumer confidence report that we have to generate every year to make sure we are open and are disclosing to our consumers of the water the state of the data on their water quality by law. Plumber's perspective, after working with many plumbers over the years, when I couldn't get them to talk to us, usually we had to separate the people and get a rapport with the people for them to actually discuss these issues. 99% of leaks in the plumbers knew this occurred in this thin wall pipe we now use because copper is expensive and the plastics industry is taking over the market of home building, the PEX industry and other types of plastics. So they have to compete in this global business, billions of dollars of business. And the builders are involved. And so if you have a thin wall pipe, once the propagation occurs, it's just a matter of time before it occurs. Again, if you have a thicker, more expensive type of pipe, it's going to take much longer for the pit to occur. Very few weeks are noted until a long period of time has occurred in the home, 25, 30, 35 years, maybe even longer, are in the thicker class pipes. Builders don't typically use that anymore because of the expense of copper. Water heaters are another area of concern. The AARP has their members say, hey, you can save a couple $100 a year if you just turn down your water heater a little. But if you do that, then biological growth can occur in the water heater and then send that into the home. Next slide. So what are the repair options? So most people will, get their plumber, put a hole in the wall and fix it. They clamp it on. They have to have someone come back and fix the wall, and then they pay that, a modest amount of money to solve the problem. And then if it continues to be a problem, then it gets to be a point where the homeowner is frustrated and they have to start talking about replacing their pipes or replacing sections of their pipe. And there's no guarantee that there still will not be corrosion in the future. Some people are sold on the idea that I can treat the water better than the utility, and that leads to a number of problems in a person's home because they don't necessarily maintain that equipment like a utility maintains for all of your consuming public. A major responsibility. Next slide. So 20 years of understanding this is a huge problem in Florida. Back in the late 1990s, early 2000 timeframe, the state initiated a study. It was a University of Florida professor that was in the building industry, led it. And I go to these meetings. I was part of wasn't in the actual study, but we'd go and we'd participate in the discussion. And copper is a significant problem for the United States. The other thing it talked about is that the emphasis of the water purveyor's responsibility is to provide safe drinking water. That is their responsibility. And that the responsibility for taking care of their home is the homeowner's responsibility, the residents or the owner of the building or the structure's responsibility. And that to help people with this ordeal, because of the financial impact to them, because it is a huge financial burden to people that aren't expecting it, is that you, through the state laws, there are methods which, in your proactiveness of just working with your constituents, you already have similar programs, I think, on the wastewater side, where you can work with them to help them solve their problem. It's like 3 notes that I'd like to leave with you, so I kind of wrap up my section, is the water purveyor, whether they're a private water system or a public water system, they're not responsible for the integrity of what happens in that home. They're responsible for compliance with the federal law. Secondly, there's many different types of corrosion that you're dealing with that is very complex, and there's a number of reasons why it occurs. And the third thing, the most important thing, is in the state of Florida, there's a legal case that's probably the most important case that's been when people have tried to seek other remedies than taking care of this problem, is the Brynwood case in Clearwater, where a large condominium association sued Clearwater for their heat treatment, saying the water was faulty because it was a tort law widget. There was a widget and your widget failed, and I lost my plumbing. So it was dismissed because of sovereign immunity. And that's the way it is in most states. You can go to each state, and each state has a key legal decision that was made typically back in the 70s or 80s that still holds true today. And unfortunately, I just have to mention that because this is people, when they get emotional, it's very difficult to discuss rational solutions with them. And you, as elected officials, know this to be true when you deal with your constituents all the time. Next case. So what can the utility do? Be proactive. Understand the position of the homeowners. You yourself may have been in a position like I was. It's not an easy thing to go through. Be honest. That's the issue with certainty, and know your chemistry. Continue your compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act, because that is the mission of the utility, is to protect the public health from the water in the water system. Because again, the exposure to contaminants involuntary in any of your public places. Explain the things that we're kind of hearing today, and then make sure that they understand that unfortunately the water utility is responsible for the water quality and meeting the law, and the homeowner is responsible, and the building owners, it's like you're responsible for the structures for which you own. Right. Here's some sources, and since I'm a professor, I have to make this disclaimer that these are opinions of me as a professional engineer and a professor in the state of Florida, and may not represent the Board of Governors, my president of the university, the Board of Trustees, and those types of persons. And with that, I appreciate your patience with this discussion.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, City Manager, City Clerk, and everyone listening on the phone right now. My name is Patrick Davis. I'm a Vice President with Hazen and Sawyer, and I've been working in the water industry here in South Florida and around the world, designing and optimizing water treatment systems for more than 40 years. I've always also had the great good fortune of watching the City of Miramar system develop almost from inception. And I'd like to, before I introduce our second to last speaker today, Dr. Bill Becker from Hazen and Sawyer, I'd like to just pause for a moment and offer a little bit of perspective historically and maybe provide a little bit of context for the discussion that we're having today. Now, we heard from Dr. Virgin exactly what the water quality is that is created at your east plant and at your west plant. And we heard from Mark Miller of Kimley Horn the research and the science that the city has been going through recently in order to optimize the system. And by the way, all water systems all over the world always have to be optimized. Water does not stay the same. It gets hotter, it gets colder, people move in, people move out, demand patterns change, the age of water in a pipe can change, and this all has an impact on water quality. And so a good utility is a utility that watches that pays attention to that, and stays up to speed with that. And the City of Miramar has been doing that, and Mark's data, I think, illustrated that. And then Dr. Duranto just talked to us about what are the causes of corrosion? What causes corrosion to then propagate once it's been here? Our second to last speaker, Dr. Becker, will explain to you what other communities are doing to deal with this. But before we get to that, I'd like to say that I had the fortune to be in the room with the City of Miramar back in the early 1990s, when there was just a tiny plant in the east, and most of Miramar was dirt. There was virtually nothing west of Palm Avenue, and the city was poised for explosive growth. And they had some really difficult decisions to make. How do they provide water for all those new residents who have now been here for 20 or 25 years? And how do they provide water for these businesses? And what treatment system is going to be utilized? And I sat in that room and I saw people like City Manager Hargray was here, Deputy City Manager Gordon was around, and I watched the commission make the decisions at that time. And the choices, to simplify it, were they could simply go with lime softening technology. Lime softening was widely used still in Miami-Dade County, still used in the city of Fort Lauderdale. In fact, they still are to this day, although Fort Lauderdale is about to change. Or they could go with membranes. Now, the argument for lime softening and those who advocated for that is that it's far less expensive. And the city had an awful lot of expenses that they were faced with very few customers. So it was a real challenge to do. And yet the Commission of Miramar at that point in time did not take the easy solution. They implemented membranes. And the rationale for implementing the membranes was, even though lime softening was likely to meet all the regulatory standards known at the time, City of Miramar staff and commission worried about what a future regulation might look like, something that was unpredictable. Or more importantly, what if there were contaminants in our water down the road that affected public health? And so the city made the decision to implement membranes. You were way ahead of the curve. So that was something that commission did and those staff members did. This commission took a similar stand. Mark Miller mentioned that recently you've made a big investment in your east plant. You've put in membranes at the east plant. Now you are 100% membranes in the City of Miramar. And as we look at those decisions that the city made, the key decision criteria for everything that you've done in the 30 years that I've been watching you is to protect your residents' health. And you have done a fantastic job in that. And I know today is a difficult discussion. It's been going on for some time, and it's likely to go on for a time in the future. But we're not here talking about public health. And if you watch the news at night or if you read the newspaper every day, you'll see that there are utilities across the United States that do have to deal with that, either because of underinvestment or poor investment in the past. Miramar is not there, so from a perspective, I think that we should recognize that and we should be happy with that. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have challenges. It doesn't mean that there isn't optimization that just did occur and is going to continually occur. So the question is, have you evidenced a willingness to do that? And I would say, based on the data that I've reviewed in the last 2 months, after asked by the city administration to look into this, you are moving. You did optimize, and I have no doubt that you will continue to optimize. And I think now, as you listen to Dr. Becker, you'll also find out that you're not very different from other utilities that are dealing with this same issue, except for the fact that there is no water quality component here from a public health perspective, something to be proud of. So I just wanted to make a couple of remarks just to make sure that those listening on the phone are reassured that you have a tremendous water utility system from a public health perspective. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Bill Becker. Dr. Becker is the director of Hazen and Sawyer's National Drinking Water Program. He's out of Colorado, and he came in today to participate in this workshop with us. So, Bill?
Thanks, Pat. Hello, Mayor and City Council. For those of you that don't know about Hazen and Sawyer, we are a national firm. We design water treatment plants all across the world. We, locally here, we've done a lot with membrane treatments, and we have one of the most robust applied research programs in the country. And we do help utilities throughout the country optimize for the lead and copper rule for other corrosion issues. I've been at Hazen for 20 years, as Pat said, and I want to spend a little time talking about 3 case studies, but also give you a little background information about the Water Research Foundation work that's been done. For those of you that don't know, the Water Research Foundation is the premier funding agency for drinking water quality issues around the country. They sponsor millions of dollars of research on an annual basis. They work with EPA and other funding organizations. And they've done a series of reports on copper pitting corrosion over the years. Quoted up here are some results from one of those reports back in 2008. And they've documented that pinhole leaks have been found in all 50 states. And it's estimated that about 8% of homeowners across the country have experienced pinhole leaks. This is a map from that report, and in there they show you where the leaks have occurred, the ones they studied, and they estimate that about $1 billion a year is spent repairing those leaks. As Professor Dranso pointed out earlier, there are a lot of different causes of pitting corrosion. They span the range from different water quality type issues, to electrical factors, to materials, and to workmanship itself. And what these studies find is that there are multiple causes, and those causes and solutions are really complex. Darren Lytle and Mike Schock from EPA have done a lot of work on this over the years. Here's some quotes from a couple of papers that they've published in peer-reviewed literature, where it says reliably establishing the underlying source of the pinhole leak problem is complicated. It goes on to say it's likely many causes, as we've presented here today, and that there's really no simple way of reproducing and studying all those causes. So 3 case studies I want to briefly mention. One is a very recent study in Folsom, California. This last year, they identified pinhole leaks in residential plumbing. They immediately, like you did, retained the services of 2 engineering firms. They engaged Mark Edwards Research Group at Virginia Tech University to do some scale analysis on pipes. And then they produced a final report. And in their particular case, the causes were attributed to a distribution system water quality that had a very high pH and a low alkalinity that chlorinated. The solutions that they put forward were to add orthophosphate, which is a corrosion control inhibitor at the plant, and to adjust the pH downward slightly. And I should note, as was presented earlier, Miramar does already add a corrosion inhibitor. Second case study is from Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, which serves the Prince George's and Montgomery counties outside of Washington, D.C. and suburban Maryland. They had massive amounts of pinhole leaking back in the early 2000s. In fact, over 5,000 pinhole leaks were identified at the time. The Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development did a whole report on this. There were several other reports done by engineering firms as well. And while this particular report didn't clearly define the source and cause of potable water pinhole leaks, they did give some potential causes and solutions. And this is in line with everything you've heard today. It's really difficult to pin it down to one particular issue. In their case, they also decided to add orthophosphate as a corrosion inhibitor at that time. Third case study is Palm Beach County School Districts. Not too far from here. They had some pinhole leaks back in the early 2000s as well. Followed a series of similar protocols and retaining engineers, did a lot of scale analysis. In this case, they did identify microbial-induced corrosion as an issue. And their solutions were to pipe flush more regularly. And they also did something fairly innovative, which is went with an epoxy lining of the pipe interior in the schools, and the reports are that that seems to work well. And so everything you've heard today kind of boils down to this. It's a very, very complex issue, and that it requires a careful and methodical analysis. Everything from looking at electrochemistry, water chemistry, conducting bench pilot studies, field observations, corrosion scale analysis. A lot of different things go into developing that sound understanding of what the cause is, and that's important to do before you can develop the best solutions. And so far, the city has developed a comprehensive series of next steps to identify a path forward, and I'll turn it back over to Mr. Kelvin Baker for that.
Thank you, Dr. Becker. This evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commission, we provided you with a status summary and an overview of our current system. We've heard reports from experts, from Kimberly Horn, and we've heard a national perspective from Hazen and Sawyer. The million-dollar question is, where do we go from here? The city remains committed to helping its residents with this and any other issue related to water. We'll continue to take the following steps. We maintain compliance with our drinking water standards, continue data collection, and continue best management practices for system optimization. Review legalities of potential building code changes, plastic versus pipe. Establish a city website on copper pipe pitting to share information with the public, as we certainly will make these materials available to our community. We have a helpline available to allow our community that's experiencing these problems to call and share with us their concerns. But again, our commitment is to remain proactive and provide the experts in the areas that is needed. Again, where do we go from here? We want to provide some solutions. In our recent meeting a couple of weeks ago, each one of you said, well, we know there is a problem out there and it's been around a while, but we need to hear some solutions as to how we can move forward. I do want to say before I get into the solutions, and I know we made reference to it in the presentation, but the city has been challenged in court on this issue and prevailed. So it's been out there, it's been has been challenged. There's sufficient case law, and perhaps our attorney will highlight and make some comments on it later on. So let's talk about some solutions as to what can be done. And just in talking with some of our customers, I'm already hearing that some of these are already being put in place, but just for those that perhaps are listening and may not know where to go and where to turn and what to do, I trust these items here will provide some guidance. One of the first areas is to take a look at the homeowner's policy. Understanding while there may be some insurance companies that may not provide coverage for pipe, but there are some that do, and a large percentage of them actually provides coverage for leaks, pipe leaks in a home. So we want to make sure that's out there. Secondly, since a large percentage of our community have homeowners associations, and it will clearly be a good economy of scale for a community that is experiencing this issue community-wide to perhaps put some type of assessment program in place and bring in a couple of plumbers at a substantially reduced price to kind of fix the problems in many of the homes, therefore lowering the actual cost for the improvements. Lastly, we want to bring forward and recommend a city low interest loan program as funds become available to assist some of these homeowners that may not have the option to use their homeowner's policy, or maybe even a hybrid of the two, what they can get from one to make up the difference using our low interest loan program. As we looked at many cases around the country, I would say the latter has not been something that any of them has entertained. But again, we are a city that takes our customer concerns to heart, and the desire to somewhat begin to move this needle and put this problem before us. We think these options and these alternatives before you is that step in the right direction. Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioner, these are our recommendations. This is our report. We remain available to answer any questions that you might have. I've been informed that the attorney is available and would like to make some comments as it relates to what I made reference to a few minutes ago.
Yes,
attorney, go ahead, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. You all might recall that last year we reported on the People's Trust Insurance Company
Mr.
versus.
Powell, just make sure that your mic is not muted, or if IT can ensure that his audio is coming through on the feed. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Hello? Are you able to hear me?
We can. I think those on WebEx can hear you, but we cannot hear you in the chambers.
Okay, well, I've just enabled the video. I don't know if that will help.
Go ahead, Mr. Powell.
Yes, thank you. Just to refresh your recollection, last year we reported on the People's Trust Insurance Company versus the City of Miramar. And in that case, there were several claims brought against the city for pipe corrosion. And as the presenters mentioned, the Brinewood case is what we relied upon in those proceedings, and the court agreed with the prevailing case law that states that the city, once it complies with regulatory regulations, the city is not responsible for any corrosion that may result in pipes. Now, as you've heard today, the basis for that principally is that there's so many different factors that go into what causes pipe corrosion, and the courts have determined that so long as there's compliance with the regulations, the cities will not be held, the municipalities will not be held responsible for any corrosion. So once that has been held throughout the country, the municipalities are essentially immune from any responsibility for resulting personal property damage to homes. Obviously, the city, our city is taking a step further in addressing homeowners' issues as presented by Mr. Baker. But I just want you all to be keenly aware that this is not a liability issue that the city is faced with in terms of any personal property damage as a result of these pinhole leaks in our residents' homes.
That concludes our presentation, Mr. Mayor. We remain available to answer any questions.
All right, we'd like to thank the city manager and team for the presentation and the consultants that have provided information. As this is a city workshop, we do have an opportunity for city commission members if they have any questions regarding the presentation. So I'll just start and go down the line with the city commissioners, starting with the vice mayor and moving down for any comments or inquiries that may be by any members of the commission. If you don't have any comments or questions, just let me know when I call your name. Vice Mayor Chambers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me start by asking, this presentation, was this for the commission or was this for the resident and having the leak experience? And how many residents have been notified of this meeting?
Vice Mayor, if I made this, this is a workshop specifically for the commission.
Okay, so the resident was not asked to tune in and
Vice Mayor, if I made the residents have been allowed to listen in to the presentation.
Okay. I have another question. I'm not sure who will answer this one. In terms of construction, when the plumber is doing the layout of the pipes, and usually they have an extension, that the pipe comes in, and there's a overflow extension that goes up into the wall, whether it's plastic or copper. And what that does, if anyone have experience in their home when you turn on the pipe, there's some vibration. There is a overflow extension that goes up. Sometimes they make it very short, sometimes they make it very tall. And what that does is when the water rusts in, it's that extension, the higher it is, it prevents the vibration of the pipe. And that's why you see they secure those inflow water pipe, because there's a lot of vibration there. And I know sometimes they make the pipe, flow pipe a little short. And if there's regulation that making sure that the plumber go a little taller and have them throughout the house, that would cut down on that vibration. I don't know if that vibration has an effect on the copper pipe leaking along with the lightning and other stuff that was illustrated in the program. I'm just asking if there's any regulation to make sure that pipe is extended much taller to reduce the vibration.
Yeah. Yeah, Vice Mayor, I'll yield to any of our experts in here. I do know that the entire pipeline infrastructure in a home must meet the building code. If it is a requirement that that line be a certain height in the building code, it must meet the building code when the plumber goes out to make that final inspection.
Anybody have any perspective on that, or no one here can speak to that?
Any additional questions, Vice Mayor?
Huh?
Any additional questions?
Okay, yeah. I notice we have here where we have a number for a customer to call if they have a pinhole leak. What is the response to that homeowner if they call and they have a leak? Do we have an answer for that?
Vice Mayor, as we plan to move forward, we recognize that there must be a continuous education process as to what options our water customer have available to them when they are seeing these problems. If you recall the chart that we introduced very early on in the presentation, it had roughly maybe a couple of dozen type of complaints. So why, we may be hearing of different things happen in different places. Most of it is not documented in our system. So we would have the ability to reach out to someone and find out what they're doing and some programs that are available to actually assist them in that effort. So the plan is moving forward. If what is before you this evening, if it's something that is approved, then there's an education process that will go into place in terms of enlightening the customer of some alternatives that may be available to them.
Thank you. Also, I'm going to lump these two questions together, which is the continued data collection and process optimization and the review of legal and potential building code change. Are we going to identify what we could make changes in the building code, or we already have? I'm not sure. It says plastic versus copper. Anyone can speak to the strength of the plastic versus copper? And if anyone can speak to that, or no?
My understanding, Vice Mayor, of our building code, it currently provides the flexibility to the actual contractor. So, usually most of these items boil down to costs. And generally, when you share with a homeowner, one versus the other, they more than likely are going to want to go the most inexpensive route. Hopefully, in our educational campaign, as we begin to launch heavy education as it relates to this, then we'll have individuals making more informed decisions as to what type, begin to look at the material that a contractor is actually using for their home.
And that's exactly my point. The problem is, whether it's copper or plastic, there's different grade and different quality in the plastic versus plastic, or copper versus copper. There's different thickness, different strength. And when a homeowner who's not qualified to determine the strength of the material, who have no knowledge of construction, all they give them is the difference in cost. They're going to opt for the lower cost. But if someone would put regulation in place to make sure that the builder would use a certain standard, whether it's plastic or copper, whether it's Romex versus conduit or 8-gauge wire versus a 12-gauge, it's make a big difference. The homeowners can't determine that because they don't know. They don't understand that the smaller the electrical wire is, it's less current it's going to carry, and the equipment is going to be ruined much quicker.
Yes, sir.
So these are the things that the homeowner doesn't understand. And the thinner the copper, I noticed on one of the slides, the copper looks pretty thick, and I was able to see it. But sometimes when you even have the actual copper in your hand, it's so thin you can't even see it. And that's most of the problem. So we are leaving the homeowners to make decisions based on pricing, which is more costly on the back end, which with a less, I cost a little more upfront, but it's much cheaper upfront than on the back end when they have to move out their home, rent a hotel, and have all this repair. So that's my problem right there. It's put things in place to protect the homeowner on the back end.
Yes, sir.
And even if we're protecting them on the front end, and it pays off on the back end. And I have a serious problem with that. So this presentation doesn't really change much for me. What I said in the last commission meeting still stands. Drinking water that was produced is fine. It's the construction material. From what I'm experiencing and what I'm seeing, the quality of the copper pipe and the quality of the PVC plastic pipe, and sometimes the workmanship. So that's where it stands for me. And I hope we can give proper information to the homeowners, and create some clarity. And for those people who like to use these things as a wedge and not bringing anything to the table to assist the homeowners, I hope they stop that, because you're just fooling yourself and fooling other people. We need real solutions, because all of what I hear today doesn't change anything what's happening to those residents. They're still dealing with pipe leaking, house getting damaged, and they still need to do repair. We don't have the solution. We don't have the assistance. I mean, I'm yet to see it. I hope we can come to that point where they can have some assistance. But somebody needs to be held accountable, whether it's the manufacturer or the builder. Thank you. That's my comment.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Colburn.
Thank you. First, I want to thank staff for a thorough presentation on this issue for our residents. I am very happy to know that our quality of water is good, and that was emphasized, that our water quality is in compliance at every level of government. That, to me, is one of the most important things this evening. The fact that the City of Miramar, our municipality or other municipalities are not the responsible parties for this, gives me some satisfaction as well, because it turns out to be a cost to the entire government and its residents as well. I do want to see a good public education on this issue. I think it's essential that the public is notified, informed, just like in other things that I've asked before. When I turn on channel 78, this is something that I would like to see, because it's something that our residents need. If there are things that they can do to to protect their pipes, protect their property, or address it as soon as it happens. It's good. It's good information, and it's what our residents need. Other than that, just thank you so much to the consultants as well, everyone who participated today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Coburn. Commissioner Barnes.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'm sharing a lot of gratitude with staff for the incredible comprehensive presentation that was offered to us. I was particularly impressed by the details as to the alternatives that are going to be available for homeowners. And especially so because my mom's house had this problem over a 3-year period. In fact, it was resolved just before she passed last year. And basically, this was the second time around for the copper pipes to give way. And basically, we applied to the insurance company, and it surprised me that they were able to settle as quickly as they did, and it got repaired. But I think what is incredible about what we heard today, for example, is the impact that natural phenomena like lightning has on our homes. I'm speaking from the perspective of talking for years and having not done it, of grounding my entire house, because I know what it is to be actually watching television and have lightning knock it off the stand. That comes from the fact that Florida, the entire state of Florida, is the worst lightning corridor in the entire US. And it is incredibly fascinating to hear and understand that these copper pipes can directly or indirectly be impacted by the lightning strikes. And I think staff also offered a number of opportunities, a number of chances that residents can look at to resolve the situation, including creating something of a, I'd like to call finance sharing possibility going forward. The idea of pooling with members of a homeowners association. And I think residents will go away from this workshop once they've seen the information, and some people have been actually viewing it. And as Commissioner Coburn says, people will get this information once they watch our cable channel and this is replayed. I think this has been an incredibly comprehensive report, but not just a report, but a number of hard recommendations going forward as to what residents can do. And no, it is not easy, and it doesn't change anybody's situation overnight. That is a reality. I'm convinced, however, as a homeowner, as the person who took care of my mom's house all of these years, that there are alternatives that can be dealt with. No one wants to go to an insurance company to file a claim, but that is what your insurance is all about. And I think we have to also, as has been suggested as well, look for going forward at the whole matter of standards and procedures in the construction of homes. The reality, we are going to be moving away from copper pipes. That's just reality. A number of homeowners, depending on the age of your house, you're also having problems with cast iron pipes. I hate the very thought of it, but the reality is that the alternative is PVC piping. PVC piping is going nowhere except for broken joints and so on. They're going to live forever and ever. And I think not for 1 second suggesting that this is not going to be a financial impact and or burden on our residents. This is what is going to happen going forward. And one final note, let's be very frank, let's be honest. Any developer going to build anywhere, not just the city of Miramar, but anywhere, they are going to put in the cheapest material they can find. All we need to do is remember the Chinese drywalls of a few years ago. It is what developers do. If you're building 1,000 homes, you're not going to buy the most expensive toilets. You're going to get the cheapest, and you're going to get a cut rate too because you're buying 1,000. Those are the realities we have to face. But I thank staff again for not only bringing this comprehensive report to us, especially with the inclusion of the specialists, but also offering a number of alternatives for our residents going forward.
Commissioner.
Commissioner Davis.
Good afternoon. I'd also like to thank staff for the work that they put in to bring in this presentation to the commission. What I would like to see is some involvement from our community that has been hardest hit by these pinhole leaks. And so whereas there's been some recommendations posed here today, I would really like to hear, I'd like for this to be shared with the residents and to hear their points of view. I think one way to do that, obviously, is to have an open forum where they can be invited to have a discussion, but also to do a survey with the options that were laid out here. Send them to, a subset of folks in the various neighborhoods that have had the problems, have them check to see which one they feel is suitable to them, and also to give some suggestions or maybe some information that they would share with us how they may have got their situation resolved. So I just think that we need some more participation. It is a large subset of the community that has been affected. I too have been affected on several occasions, but I think we do need to have more involvement from the community. And I know I haven't seen that. I've been here since 2019. I have not seen what took place prior to, between this lawsuit, but I think we need to engage our community, the folks in Monarch Lakes who've been hard hit, and other communities that we are aware of, so they can not only have an input, but the survey can actually go out to them as well. So that's what I'm looking for. It's all right for us to, I don't know any other person on the commission that has experienced this in their home, but I have. So I would really like to hear from the community on this one. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis, and colleagues, for your comments. First, I'd like to thank our residents for their involvement with the city in terms of reaching out to the city, in terms of pleading to the city, in terms of informing the city over the years, as you have, for some of the residents that have been impacted by this situation, have done, for working with our city staff. I know in one example, even as recently as this week, our staff went out to meet with a resident that experienced a pinhole leak at their home, to assess their situation and to, if nothing else, just to be there to see everything there and to understand what exactly has gone on and to get information from our residents. It's that type of engagement that will be required to help residents who may endure this situation. Leading up to this workshop, our residents, either through emails, phone calls to my office or to commission or to city staff, had wanted to get more information on why this is happening. What they asked us to do is to investigate, to provide information for them. And that has been, it's my commitment in terms of ensuring that we provide information to our residents, meaning getting an understanding of our utility system and how it works, getting a general understanding of how their homes are, how their plumbing systems are assembled and installed, as well as even the materials that are made available to complete the plumbing system. This presentation was able to address in some simple terms in terms of our system, as well as be able to establish the fact that the Miramar utility system is not only safe, but it's sound, and it is recognized statewide in terms of our quality. So our residents and our utility customers can be assured that they have one of the best utility systems, not in the state and in the country. But in terms of our residents who have experienced leaks in their homes, their overarching question is what is happening with our safe water that we can drink, and why are my pipes leaking? Obviously, because of the knowledge and our experience with our utility system, that our position as a city is that we have a tremendous utility system and it's safe, and we meet all federal, state, and local regulatory requirements as a utility. And we even have gone through the court process and have been able to establish the fact that the city of Miramar not only meets all of those regulatory requirements, but it was decided that our city can't be held liable for those options. None of those decisions or answers, helps our residents, even though that's our position, even though that's what the legal process has determined. So what I would like to do is to make a couple of recommendations that I think that we can put in place. Is that there's been a couple of comments regarding getting our residents' input and their experiences, but I think because of the number of residents that have been impacted, I think there's an opportunity there to gain information by perhaps us formally committing or creating a council or some sort of committee. We don't necessarily have to have an official board per se, but residents are willing to assist the city in sharing their experience, and even beyond their experience. Many of them may have had successes with their insurer, and their insurance policy covered the damage. Well, it would be great to know if residents are looking and shopping for insurance to perhaps entertain using that insurer and that particular insurance product to ensure that in the event, if something like that should happen in their home, that the policy would cover it. I think sharing those best practices. So that would be a recommendation to look into creating a council for the city for residents who are willing to share those experiences. Also, and maybe our city attorneys can respond to this in a presentation, and also as a Florida licensed general contractor, we know that there are differences in terms of classes of copper. The presentation stated and shared that 99% of leaks take place with M-class copper versus L-class copper. So my question is it legally permissible for the city to require at the building department that if a design consultant or MEP engineers are specifying M-class copper for the renovation or new construction of a plumbing system, that there be also accompanied with that submittal package for that permit application, at least some disclosure that the homeowner or the property owner is aware that that M-class copper is being specified. Obviously, that's a legal material that can be used. We can't legally prevent that, and if the engineer wants to specify that, and the owner, probably because of financial reasons, have decided they want to use that, they have the choice to do that. But at least there would be something that would, so there would be a homeowner or property owner that would not accept a material that may be susceptible to this type of problem. So I would like to ask our attorneys to see of the legality of that. We're not challenging the Florida Building Code. We're not asking it to be amended or trying to usurp the standards of the Florida Building Code. But in terms of the building official who has the responsibility of approving building permits and applications could, at least as a city, we're saying that, hey, listen, the material M-class has been known, doesn't mean that it's going to happen, but it has been known to have higher evidence of leaks, and that I am accepting this material. Similar to like how we would tell a property owner in a title search that, okay, you're buying a 3-2, but your contract says you're buying a 4-3, which means that there's been an undocumented addition to your property, but we're just letting you know that our records don't show that addition to your property. At least there's some disclosure, and buyer beware. So those would be my two recommendations as it relates to these. And I don't know if Mr. Powell has a response to the second request.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, certainly I'll take a look at that. I mean, when you mentioned that, I was actually thinking about when I do a closing, there's certain forms that the buyer of homes are put on notice for, such as radon gas, certain other naturally occurring elements, copper piping might be one of those disclosures that would fit in line with the disclosure that the building department could give residents. But I'll take a look at that to make sure that there's nothing in the Florida statutes that would prevent us from doing that. But off the top of my head, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be able to do that, but I'll give you a definitive answer.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of my closing on my remarks, to the question for the residents who want to know what is the cause of this, I was educated in this process, in this workshop, when based on the national studies, some of the local studies, is that there could be a variety of issues that could cause the leaks. So it's based on the science and the data that has been presented. It appears that there's no smoking gun that can say this one issue is the cause. What I am assured, and which I knew already in terms of the city, was taking a proactive step. Back from 2018, we have done the process, included the process of expanding or adding corrosion inhibitors to our water. And what that does is it provides interaction inside of the piping of our water distribution system that helps attenuate the development of corrosion, or the creation of corrosion in our distribution system. So many of the recommendations that some of the third-party industry experts or topic experts that have covered this issue in our local media, the City of Miramar, has been doing this since 2018, before it really kind of surfaced as of late. And my concern, however, though, is that it seems like over time, especially in the homes that would be susceptible to leaks, that many of our communities from Central to West Miramar that are now hitting 15 years old, 20 years old, 25 years old, may be more susceptible to that. And that is why I think it's even more important for us to be aggressive in getting a campaign out to provide our residents as much resources and information so they can understand what can be some of the possible causes and what are some of the things that they can do now to actually reduce the risk of this very unfortunate situation that happens. In my case, I would say a small number of homes, when you look at the 30,000+ users of our system, but one leak is too many leaks, just like, if one person loses a member of the family, it's not acceptable. So we just have to continue to partner in with our community. And based on the comments from my colleagues, I know that we all want to ensure that we are working on behalf of our residents and getting them the information that they need. All right, I see one more speaker. I'll take that comment from you, Vice Mayor, and we'll, if there's no other input from staff or colleagues, I have, and after Vice Mayor Chambers, it'll be our city manager, and we'll prepare to close out the workshop. Vice Mayor, you recognize.
Thank you, Mayor. You said we're not trying to challenge the building code and like disclosing and selling a house as to the quality of the copper. But my thing is, if we can do something upfront from our building department where the builder would have to disclose to the client who are building a home as to what's the difference in the quality of the plastic, the quality of the copper pipe, the quality of the electrical, and even the hurricane window, because they do allow to sell a window that is only 75 miles an hour load, and that's considered a hurricane-proof window, which is really not. If you get up to 85 or 90, 100, then you're out of luck. So if we can have simple explanation where the builder would have to disclose that, look, you can get a 75 miles an hour window, 150 miles an hour window, so the client could decide clearly which one they're getting, instead of just, okay, you're getting a hurricane window, but you don't know which one you're getting until you get it. You know, I think if we can put something like that, where the builder is first forced to disclose those things to consumer here in Miramar, I think that would go a long way instead of on the back end. Sorry. I just want to explain, I've been a custom cabinet builder for 40 years. And back in the days, we used to build furniture and kitchen from particle board. Now, the only threat to particle board is water, not termite, not fire. Particle board doesn't burn well, and termite doesn't eat it. So if I used to explain to my customer, if you keep water away from this cabinet, it will last you a long time, forever. And the ones who do, they still have their kitchen until this day, even 30 years ago. Back then, you could buy a sheet of plywood because of the regulation. It would, where it's coming from, would be treated, and it wouldn't come here with any termites. Regulation change, and today when you buy a sheet of plywood to make a kitchen, because people are asking more and more for plywood, and now we are using more plywood on the roof. What we're seeing here in South Florida is an increase in subterranean termites. Now, where the hell did they get here? They don't swim? How did they cross the water? The plywood are coming with the termites. So the customer started off with a product already have plywood, have termites, and that's what happened. Why we have that increase of termite here in South Florida. So one, if you explain to your customer what they're getting, or if regulation is good to prevent the customer from getting a bad product, then it's a win-win for our resident and our customer. So I just wanted to share that. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Mr. City Manager, you're recognized.
It's almost embarrassing for me to say that being the utilities director coming here in 1997, but I had the experience as Commissioner Davis of having this experience at my home. There are a couple of things that I know that we will work together with, and that is the insurance part. When I had that experience, the leak went from the bathroom to the bedroom to the kitchen. And when the walls was opened up, that's when I realized how shady work can be done. And that's what I saw, and I took pictures of it. As a utility director, I didn't think about the different types of copper, K, L, M. You didn't think about it because you kept feeling that somebody else was checking this. Well, we always got to go back to history here and remember, I moved in my house in 2001. The building industry in Miramar was moving so fast that even our department had struggles trying to keep up of inspections. and a lot of things were overlooked or never looked at. But I can tell you from my own experience, no one could have possibly looked inside my house and looked at the work that was done and would have approved it. But now we're 20 years later, 18 years ago in here, or 2 years ago, that's when I experienced this. And in my neighborhood, which is just off of Flamingo, many of my neighbors experience the same thing. Some of them a lot worse than what I experienced, especially when you have two-story homes. But there's something that I learned from this here, and that's why I welcome the idea that maybe we need to sit down and talk about this here. It's about the insurance. If you do not understand about the insurance, you can win or you can lose bad. Because I went to my insurance and they basically told me how much money, and they sent somebody there and gave a quote, and that was it. My neighbor went and hired someone to litigate with their attorneys, and they got everything done. And once you settle with your insurance company and they come and do the work in here, then you can't come back a year later. You're stuck. We have to sit down with our residents and educate them about the insurance and the insurance policy. It's very extremely important. Yes, I've spoken with our building official because I kept wondering about what can we do to make sure that what I experienced and my neighbors experience, is it anything that we can do and put our code? I even talked with Deputy City Manager William Gordon. You know, we write standards for everything that's outside or beyond the homes in here in terms of standards. What could we do? And I think that what I've heard today is an excellent idea. While we may not be able to tell the plumbers what to do in terms of the standards from the building code, but perhaps there's something the city can do is in terms of letting residents know about what they need to be looking at or questions they need to ask, or maybe even bigger than that, us letting them know the type of piping that is being used inside their homes. Now, for those that are listening, it's not about the water plant, because in my communication with Pembroke Pines, they have a line softener. That's what they use in here, and many residents have experienced the same thing. So it can't be about the water quality that's coming out of our plant, because now we're talking about another a proven line softener, because I lived a block away from a line softener plant and never had any issues. So this issue is, yes, we need to talk about it, but we also need to find some proactive ways to educate our residents and then make sure they understand one major thing. It's what Deputy City Manager William Gordon said to me. You know, to take care of the copper in your house and replace it should not cost you no more than probably $10,000 or $11,000. But if you're not careful, they'll be charging you $15,000 or even more if you don't know better. And I'm sure that has happened to our residents. And therefore, we need to educate them from our own experience. So I just wanted to share, as Commissioner Davis is that has been a previous director and was responsible for the phasing of the water plant and being involved with the treatment process in there. I fell into it too. And the simple question is making sure that the residents are knowledgeable. Now keep this in mind, that when I was getting my house built in Monarch Lakes, I wasn't there when this was being put into my house, all right? So many of the residents, when they bought their house that was being built, they were not there present every day to see the type of material that's being used. So let's keep that in mind. And where we're at today is while we can't go back and correct what has happened in the past, it's important for us to look at what is happening in the future in terms of things being built in Miramar and making sure that we put some of these protections in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I'd like to thank everyone for participating in today's workshop. This workshop is adjourned.